All right, we'll get underway. This is the 39th CALLERLAB Convention in Nashville. This is Tuesday afternoon, April 3rd, and the name of this session is Successful Dancing Habits. My name is Ed Foote from Pittsburgh. I'm your moderator, and the panelists with me are Jerry Junck from Warren, Nebraska, and Chris Pinkham from Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Today we're going to be discussing dance styling and suggestions to improve dancer skills. We had the handouts up here. I'll mention 3 of them were mine. If you like what's on any of these handouts, feel free to reproduce them and hand them out anywhere that you want. You're welcome. You were going to anyway. Our format's going to be that each of us will present for about 10 minutes. At the end of each 10 minutes, we'll ask for any questions or comments on what that person has presented. That'll take us about 30 minutes. At that point, we'll throw it open to questions, general questions from anyone. And depending on how many questions we have, we'll start back again where each of us may have input. So we're going to start with Chris Pinkham from New Hampshire.
Afternoon. I'm not used to holding a microphone in my hand, as most of you might know by now. So this one's a little odd. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the other hand rather than stick it in a back pocket. This is one of those situations where where somebody was supposed to do this and bailed on us, and then they asked me to do this, and I forgot to ask for the ribbon that said "too dumb to say no." But I'm going to do my best anyway. When I was asked to do this, I heard who I was going to be working with, and I started to feel like someone who's a pretty good cook asked to step onto a panel with a pair of executive chefs and discuss souffle. But then again, I was reminded that once in a while, a good cheeseburger ain't bad. So, when I started thinking about this, I approached it from a different position or a different situation, and I started thinking, well, I've only been doing this for a few years, and I took that thought and said, what if I turned it into an interview process with callers that I've known for a long time? And I spent a few days on the phone with some of my mentors in New England that have been calling literally decades longer than I, and came away with a lot of reminders more than things that I knew already, but things that served to be a good reminder to me again. And it's made me change a couple of things around a little bit. Although I finished this thing the night before I was leaving, please forgive the misplaced comma and the occasional typo, but the thoughts are there. The first thing I thought about when I started thinking about successful dance habits is that the description in the CALLERLAB schedule had the shortest one-sentence line to describe the whole process. So I thought that this gave us a wide open field for what we could talk about. But I think what I'd like to talk about really are some thought points, and I'll go over them. I don't have everything memorized, but I can still deal with it fairly well. As a caller, I have also never given up dancing. And by dancing constantly, it gives me a chance to do skill checks on the floor so that if I'm working with new people, I can still check their skills, make sure they're doing what I would like to see them do as newer dancers. And this is my approach. We have different approaches here today. I'm going to take a club approach. Jerry thought that he might take a festival approach or a whatever, we talked about this. And Ed deals with a completely different set of skills as well. But I started thinking about what would be the most important skill set to pass on to a dancer. And for me, I feel like I'm trapped in this corner. I'll come over here a second. For me, I thought, what would be the first thing that I would teach a new dancer to make sure that they were successful in the future? And the first thing that hit me was counter dancing. And by counter dancing, I mean lending weight to the people you are dancing with. If you have experience on the floor, most of you know that occasionally you run across a person who hands you an arm that feels like 4 pounds of spaghetti. And I will take those people back later or in a square later or off to the one side and say, let's talk about counter dancing. I want to know you're there. I want to know you're doing half the work. I don't want to feel like I'm holding you up in, say, an allemande or a square through. I want to make sure that another dancer is there for me. So counter dancing is something I always talk about, lending your weight to another person's weight so that you're dancing together, so that you're not supporting another dancer. So I like to think in terms of how do I do that? I'll take a person aside at a dance and say, let's look at that allemande left. If they were my corner and they were doing the dead fish thing, I'd say, come on, let's do this again. Let's learn, or let's talk about counter dancing. So for me, I always want to make sure that they're balancing their weight with me properly and that they're lending at least half the effort to dancing with me. And I will also make a point of going back later and queuing up or squaring up with that person and making sure that that lesson passed on. In other words, I'm looking for a strong allemande left. I'm looking for a firm handshake but a quick let go. I want to make sure that they're waiting and balancing with me in a swing through. And that really, for me, that gets people off to a good start. And all the time I run across people that still can't seem to be able to handle counter dancing. So my suggestion to you is if you are a caller and you're no longer dancing, get out there and dance every once in a while, because in doing so, you will create better dancers. And if we live by example, that makes a huge difference. The other thing I thought about is counting. When you're in a square, do you teach your dancers to count? When they're doing an 8-chain, do you teach them to count? I always try to look at, let's think in terms of, let's get these people to count. Not so loud that they disturb their neighbors, but a little bit to themselves so that they know how to flow into the next call. So I always look at how we can create that thing going with people who start to count. And that makes it pretty easy. Once they start counting, then they certainly will achieve more success as dancers. When I teach people how to count, I do something that I learned from, who was it? It was Gary Shoemake years and years ago. He was talking about how to teach dancers to cast off. And what he did, and I've been doing this for a long time, is I bring a roll of duct tape to class, and when we are teaching specifics like how we deal with quadrants and square throughs and even cast-offs, more importantly, I take 2 6-foot strips of duct tape and make a cross on the floor. Now I can take individual pairs of dancers and teach signposts and pivots. I can teach cast-offs by not having them watch the walls so much, but for a few moments watching their feet and teaching them what wall is the 0 wall, what wall is the number 1 wall, and count. And if they mumble, I say count. Count, count, count. There is no harm in counting. So the duct tape thing works well for me. The only problem is later I usually have to have somebody come along with a razor blade and peel it up because they've been standing on it for days and days. So the duct tape thing is just a quick little check. And it's humorous and people enjoy that. But it also sets them up so that they can see that we are dancing in quadrants, not just sloppily moving around the floor. I want some precision when I see some dancers in front of me. So counting. Think about it. Do you ask your dancers to count? Do you teach them about quadrants without getting into the mathematics and all of the stuff behind it? You still want to keep it on the simplistic side. So from counting, that led me into thinking about better precision on the floor. And one of the things I always remind my dancers of is that there are no 37.5-degree turns on a floor. I always like to see crisp turns. And by encouraging precision, we can get those folks out of those minor turns and get them into good, clean, 90-degree, 45-degree, 180-degree turns. The only math course I ever did well in high school was geometry. The rest of them, forget it. So think about that. We always want to encourage precision. And how do we get our dancers to be more accurate? I think that kind of falls on us to explain that. And in doing so, I'm going to fall back on that quadrant idea and say, this is how we do this. We keep our turns crisp. We don't turn away from the set. And we always walk in terms of those nice, crisp turns. When you're lost, how many people tell their dancers not to turn around? It happens, you know. If I could give them a compass, it might help, but then again, it might not. So I always ask them not to turn around. I like to encourage these dancers not to start spinning their own top and looking for a place to be. And hopefully somebody experienced will be there to guide them into a place, not to shove them into place. So I want people to think about, If they get lost, how do you get out of it? And what I would ask them to do is, if you find yourself lost, stop, don't turn around, don't start spinning, wait, because someone will help you. And by not turning around, then you have a better shot of being where you need to go afterwards. So I think about it. When you're lost, don't turn around, don't spin in place, don't look loose, don't get the Google eye thing going, just stop, let somebody guide you into place. The other thing that I look at is, how do I deal with older dancers on the floor? In that some older dancers no longer swing. Some younger dancers no longer swing. The swing is dead. Long live the swing, as you know. So when I deal with older dancers on the floor that are uncomfortable with the swing, I've taught my dancers to, when they approach an older dancer whom they know does not swing, I will say, count out the swing, 1, 2, 3, and then promenade. And it's much easier. I have a 90-year-old great-great-grandmother that comes every week. She dances almost every tip. She gave up her car last week, which was unfortunate, but she does not swing. And the first few times I saw someone try to swing her, I stopped them and said, count out the swing. We don't always have to swing. So some older dancers may not be able to. And in teaching these folks to treat other dancers a little more carefully, we're better dancers for it. The other thing I'd like to mention is that, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one caller on the floor at any given time. Well, there may be callers dancing on the floor, but I don't need somebody to assist me in calling to dancers from the square. I'm the one that's up there. I'm in charge. I would prefer to have dancers not teach people how to do stuff from the floor. We all hear that confusing talk when somebody's made a mistake. 3 or 4 people are trying to tell somebody what to do. That's the time where I say, stop, everybody take a breather, please don't tell anybody what to do. And in doing that, I'm advising my experienced dancers not to advise the less experienced dancers. And in doing so, they keep quiet. I get to prepare an explanation, deliver that to people, and hopefully what this will do is bring about a better dancer. So think about it. You're the only caller on the floor, and I'd prefer to have me be the only caller on the floor. So the other thing I thought about was courtesy. And a lot of us have experienced more and more people with rough dancing, walking through squares, being a little rude here and there. So I went back through some material, and I found some talking points, and you folks can see them in the handout. I don't have to bring them all out, but things like never pass by a square if there's one available. Be friendly, dance with everyone, smiles work all the time. Unless it's an emergency, don't leave your square. Thank everyone, including the caller and the curate at the end of the evening, even if they didn't do a job that you would have liked to see them do. And also offer to help set up a hall, offer to break down equipment, and especially offer to help carry the caller's equipment back and forth from the car. That's number 1, I think, Diane. Arrive early, stay a little late, help to clean up the hall at the end of the night. And by teaching courtesy throughout your teaching sessions, I think you bring about a more successful dancer, you bring about a more courteous dancer, and I think you'll reap the rewards from that aspect as well. The other thing I looked at was I went around and found some documents, and I will give them to you. And I'm going to start here. Remember this one? Jim's already sent me his check for this, okay? I expect yours in the mail one of these days. This is a book called Standard Choreography, and what this is it's a compilation of figures and dance routines that were written by my associate Jerry Junck here and Jim Mayo, and it is absolutely loaded with training tips, figures, and everything else. If you don't have this, take a look at Palomino and pick it up. Does that work for you now? Good. So that's one. The other thing that I came up with was in I think it was 2002 CALLERLAB. Tim Mariner and Andy Shore did a thing called Teaching Tips for Basic and Mainstream, and there's about a dozen pages running from circle to the left to recycle, and each one of them has a styling tip in them, and it gives you some hints as to how to deal with people that are having problems on the floor. And that is something that you should look at, and that's still on the CALLERLAB website. And I believe that I had one more, maybe not. I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, also in 1997, one of the CALLERLAB sessions dealt with teaching as well, and that may still be on the website. So a good book, a great book, an excellent book. How am I doing on that? Good. And then the teaching tips document will help you as well. So both of those have some great stuff in them to help you bring newer dancers and class people along. And last but not least, I have a couple more items, and then I'm going to turn this over. When I talk to dancers, instead of tempo and other ideas, I talk about hustle and flow. And for me, flow is how to teach a dancer to move decently from one call to the next. So when I first start teaching, I work with flow. And when the dancers get up to speed and they're starting to be more comfortable, then I put some hustle back into it. So gradually over a couple of months, I'll boop, boom, boom, I'll bump my tempo up to a point where I feel it's a more appropriate tempo for people to dance at. I'll start a little slow because I want reaction time to improve gradually. And I've always found that it's like taking a frog and putting it in a pan of cold water and putting it on the stove, and the frog will not jump out even until the water's boiling. If we put somebody in and the water's boiling, they're going to jump out fast. So I start off a little slow and improve my tempo or increase it as I go along. And let me see, what do I have? Yes. When we're talking about styling, a couple of months ago, I was having problems with a slide through. Some people, even though we'd been doing star through for weeks and weeks, when people first start to drop hands, you lose the security blanket of holding onto somebody's hand. And I tried a couple of different things back and forth, and there were a couple of people that just weren't getting it. So what I was thinking about is how would I create some sort of memory tag that would help people learn the slide through without going through a lot of stuff. And Carol, could you come up and help me for a second? So what I came up with, this is why I missed my headset. I'm going to have to let this go for a second. What I came up with was this. I asked them, we need to keep on the mic. Oh, God. Whoa. Then I need both hands for this. What I came up with was I asked, what would Fred Astaire do? And as far as I'm concerned, for a slide through, Fred Astaire would have gone like this. Swish. Boom. And they turn around, honey. With what? With another. You were fine. Oh, she was too close? We were doing a slide through. Yes. One more time. Just like this. Swish. And all of a sudden, I have people sliding through like crazy. They're all dancing like Fred Astaire. Thank you. And the memory tag is solidly embedded in their heads. So we call that the Happy Time Swish up in New Hampshire. And lo and behold, we're seeing this all over New Hampshire now. It's caught on. There's nothing wrong with a slide through. You're seeing it in Kansas too. Holy smoke. Maybe it's not a local phenomenon after all. But it was just something that I thought might be kind of interesting because, you know, as much as we dance with our feet, we also dance with our hands. And so it was just one of those little tags that people hooked onto, and then a whole class of people that were having problems with a very simple call were suddenly doing that. So that is something that you might think about doing. What if people are having problems with something? What kind of a little memory tag can you create for them to make them more successful?
Okay.
And
are you also? Oh,
can you let me finish this or what, fella?
Well, we want to.
I'm almost done. I have one more thing. Conclusions. First, a suggestion. This whole process made me start thinking about keeping a habits list close by that I can refer to from time to time. Because, you know, as callers, we have so many hundreds and hundreds of details to remember just to get people from September into May. So start keeping a little habits list, and you can even keep it by your turntable or your computer at night. And if you're teaching a particular call, go back into some of the reference material and see what they have to say. And maybe that will give you a memory tag to make things work better for yourself. So by interviewing my peers on this was a great relearning experience. It reminded me of things that I may have forgotten to do. It reminded me of things that I need to do to make better dancers. Last, and I'm done in 30 seconds. When we walked in here on Saturday morning, the place was loaded with dogs. And what they were having was a clicker training weekend. So I started talking to some of the people at this because, you know, the first thing I do when I leave my house is I start missing my dogs. I start missing my wife too, but I miss my dogs. I talked to a lady who is teaching gymnastics. And what is she using? A clicker. There's a website called TagTeach, that's TagTeach.com. And these people are learning how to use clickers to train people. I'm not saying I'm going to use this to train dancers, but, you may get them to salivate a little bit. Who knows?
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions on what Chris presented in the back? Yeah, we need to have questions on the mic.
Barbie Ashwell from Oregon. I wanted to tell you, by the way, we do the swish in Oregon, too.
Whoa, it's not as close as I thought it was.
It has made an amazing difference at our new dancer classes. What I wanted to know, because this is one of my pet peeves, that I've been dancing since 1979, and I don't see a lot of improvement, and I'm asking all the experts here who are callers and have been in this program for a long time to give me some suggestions on how I can make a difference so I'm not so frustrated. When you talk about precision dancing, where I really see that play a part is when you're doing a grand square. And people cut the steps out. There's nothing precise about it once they've graduated from lessons. What can we as dancers do? I mean, you can't have your club caller up on stage before he starts to dance say, now remember, we're going to count out the beats to grand square. So does anybody have any suggestions?
One thing I do with my club, I make it into a game. I tell them, of course, it's the grand square is 32 beats, and you'll see some weaker dancers who aren't well trained do it in less beats. But of course, you don't want to do it that way. So we psychologically get them. Then I have them as a fun thing counted out. 1, 2, 3, turn. 1. And it's become a game, and the whole club in unison will count it out that way. And it's a fun thing for them, and it gets it doing it very precise. Unfortunately, you can only really do that with your home club. On the road, I virtually will never do a singing call that has a grand square in it, because they're going to finish it 6 beats ahead, and then I'm just standing there singing, and they're doing nothing. So I've given up on the grand square of people knowing how to do it correctly. Chris, did you have a comment on it, or Jerry?
Susan Morris from the Seattle, Washington area. There's a caller in our area that started on the turn doing a clap-clap. So some of the dancers he's trained at other dances will do the clap-clap, and then everybody joins in the game. So you do 1, 2, 3, clap, clap. So when you clap the corners, and then it's the goal to get the whole floor doing it. So then you're all together. I tease my dancers, you paid to dance all the steps, you might as well dance them all.
That's good. There's a comment from, where was it? It's Europe or Australia about the grand slide. Is it Australia? Yeah. Jerry says Australia. They're doing grand slide instead of grand square, and everybody does it perfectly with perfect timing. And I'm not quite sure the definition. You can look that up, but it's sliding and then sliding in and then backing out and sliding. Whenever you're going to the side, you don't turn, you slide sideways. And they say it works perfect. They have great success with it over there. They're encouraging us to put it on the mainstream list. It probably isn't going to happen. But it's interesting that this whole country of Australia is so gung-ho on Grand Slide, and the emails from the top callers over there are all pushing CallerLab to consider Grand Slide from the mainstream.
Janet Oliveri, North Glen, Colorado. I'm not a caller, but I am a dancer, and what I do when I go to dances, because I dance a lot, is I count 32 beats. And if there's 7 other people in that square that are not doing 32 beats, they have to wait for me. And the next time I dance with the square, it's like they will wait. They will do 32 beats. And eventually the whole floor is doing 32 beats. But it's my initiative out on the floor to take the time to do 32 beats.
As a caller, when I'm at somebody's dance, I will do the grand square in the full 32, and everybody else finishes earlier. But I can see by their look that they realize they've been bad. Yeah. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Chris. And we'll now turn it over to Jerry Junck.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Chris. Chris raised some interesting items, the counter dancing, counting, things like that. Ed has some things here, and I don't want to step on his toes, so I'm not going to talk about his. I can step on the toes of a foot anytime I want.
And Foote is in the room.
And Foote is in the room. This session is called Successful Dance Habits. And while I don't want to turn it into a teaching session and get off subject, it actually starts with teaching dancers properly. Good dancing habits begin right away when you start your class. And so good dancing habits starts with the caller and with his teaching habits and how he presents things. So I think that's where you have to start. Now, two things affect teaching in this day and age. We don't have enough new dancers to take the time necessary to really train them properly. The club needs the dancers. Financially, the club can't afford to do classes. So we have a time constraint put on us, which makes us do two things. We have to be more effective with our teaching and more efficient. And that's a fact. So in order to do that, if we can be effective and efficient, we can reduce frustration. It all starts with the caller. And I think the first thing you need to have people understand is that you need to hold hands. If I teach every day in Mesa, Arizona, I do 11 sessions a week. I call 11 times a week. And if I say touch the hands once, I say it 1,000,000 times in the 22 weeks I'm in Mesa. If we can get people to touch hands, most of their mistakes go away. Most of their mistakes. Another thing, I try to teach people to walk to music or to dance to music, to get on the floor and actually show them how to move. Mike Seastrom does a demonstration of that. Bob Osgood did a demonstration of that, and I don't pretend to get on the floor here and show you how to do that. But we all know that if you move to music, you're walking on your toes, not on your heels. You're not clopping around. One of the things I've seen a lot of people doing now is dancing in tennis shoes. I have no earthly idea how you can dance in a tennis shoe. I swear. Well, you broke your foot, so what? You'll get over the broken foot. Yeah. But to dance in tennis shoes, to me, is just, it's incredible. And it's no wonder people clop around rather than dance because they have to pick their feet up. They can't slide them. They need to understand that it's dancing. It's not just solving a choreographic puzzle. We dance to different positions. So hands are totally important, completely important in what we do. And I'm going to get some people up here in a minute. We'll talk about that. Continuous reminders. Callers need to understand when we're teaching or when we're calling to dancers, dancers will have good habits if we call so that they can maintain good habits. Unless you hear the word left in front of it, almost without exception, every call we do is a right hand followed by a left hand. I don't care what you say. Almost everything we do is a right hand followed by a left hand. If you can call that way, the dancers will have good habits because they're alternating hands and they're moving left to right, right to left. It's so important that as a caller you keep that in mind. Good dancing habits come from good calling habits, good presentation, the way you present your material. The other thing, and all of you have seen this because you're all callers. Flippo, come on in. I want to look at you. He ran. Come in here. One of the things that actually amuses me is how many times people, and especially ladies, will square up on a corner so they can go either way. You'll do a scoot back, and the girls won't get turned 180 degrees. They'll turn 37 degrees, like he said over here, and they'll face a corner because that way they could go either way, depending on which way the guy's coming at. Everything we do is called square dancing for a reason. Now, there are things done on the diagonal, I agree. However, if you're not facing a wall straight on, if you're not square with the couple you're working with, chances are the boys are wrong. It's that simple. I said you could sit there, Flippo. Don't be giving advice. I'll give you a microphone. But the point is, we need to be square with the couples we work with. Unless you're working a 4-couple figure, spin chain through, relay the deucey, spin chain and exchange the gears, coordinate, things like that. You're basically going to be working with a couple directly across from you. Consequently, you need to be square with that couple. You need to be square with walls. If you want good dance habits, Chris talked about crisp 90-degree turns, 180-degree turn. That's important if you're doing a cast 3/4, a 270-degree turn. And I don't mean you have to be so precise that you're so strict you can't do anything. But you need to understand if you're squared up with a wall or you're squared up with a couple in front of you, everything is going to work more smoothly. Everything. And it's so important. When you're teaching, 2 calls that people have trouble with, scoot back and walk and dodge. And it's a very simple thing. And I'd like a square at this point in time, if I may. No, I'm fine right here. Yeah. If we can have boys, we got more women we know what to do with in this session. Here we go. Okay. Let's get enough boys to make this work, because we have people here watching and we want to make this work. Marilyn, you want to dance with Lewis? Thank you. All right, heads, if you would, take a step forward and face the corner. All right, touch a quarter. Good dancing habits come from understanding how the call works. For instance, a scoot back, everybody turns around. Watch what happens. Scoot back. Everybody turns around 180 degrees. This is one of those calls where the girls may not get turned around 180 degrees. They'll maybe kind of look at a corner to see which way the guy's coming from. Scoot back again, ladies go. Everybody turns around. When I teach, I teach them that. Everybody turns around. Watch what happens on a walk and dodge. Nobody turns around. Walk and dodge. Everybody turns around on a scoot back. Nobody turns around on a walk and dodge. Yeah. Yeah, if the girls turn around on a walk and dodge, they'll be sick in the morning. That's just the way it is. Yeah. Partner trait. Okay. Yeah, pass the ocean. Swing through. Boy run. Ferris wheel. Center 4, pass through, touch a quarter, check away, center straight. Okay. I have, for the last year or so, at least one tip a night, I work with cast-off 3/4 from waves, because it's just something nice to do. But dancers, if they haven't danced a great deal, have trouble with it. Notice that our square here, the ocean wave is at the head positions. Do we understand that? Most of you are caller. Well, everybody's caller, I guess. So we're at the head position. Anytime you do a 3/4 turn or a quarter turn, that ocean wave is going to be at the side position. Swing. Well, I got 2 boys together. Swing through again, if you would, please. Okay. I got the girls looking out. I have the girls looking out. Anytime you do a cast 3/4, Chris talked about counting, and this brought this to mind. The thing about a cast 3/4 from an ocean wave, it takes 5 steps. Watch what happens. Cast 3/4, 5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Girls trade. Believe it or not, 5 steps works. It works every time, all the time. And somebody will come up and they'll say, well, we do 2/4 music. It should be 6 steps. Yes, it should, but it takes 1 to think about it, so it's 5. Do a single hinge, center straight. Okay, swing through. Okay, and again, the girls are facing out. The other thing, for you as a caller for successful dance habits, understand that if I cast off 3/4 from this position, the girls are going to touch. Cast 3/4, 5 steps. Girls touch. Girls trade. And you want to call that early. They will dance that smoothly if you present it smoothly so that they, in fact, can have that left hand to trade. They've just done a cast 3/4. If you want successful dance habits, then those girls have to trade in the middle. They're begging for that left hand. That's just the way it works. Do a single hinge again. Centers trade, swing through. We'll do it one more time so you see it. Got a right hand cast here. Cast 3/4, 5 steps. Girls touch. Girls trade. Swing through. Boy run. Bend the line. Everything is a right hand followed by a left hand, unless you hear the word left in front of it. So is Dixie style to an ocean wave. Do a right and left through. Chris talked about this in counter dancing. He mentioned it with Alaman left and things like that. But a Dixie style to a wave is a perfect place to teach dancers what a counter dancing is all about. I actually set it up a little differently than this, but for right now, let's do this. Star through, touch a quarter. I'll show you what I mean here. Touch a quarter, scoot back. Boy fold behind the girls. I teach Dixie style to an ocean wave from right here. The boys are behind the girls. And I tell them, remember, everything is a right hand followed by a left hand. Girls shake right hands. What hand's available to you? Girls, take your right hand, pull by, turn the boy by the left to make a wave. End of call. Everything is a right hand followed by a left hand, unless you hear the word left. If you want successful dancers and dance habits, then call that way. Part of our rough dancing with dancers comes from us, from being unprepared, from not recognizing that we have to have a right hand and a left hand. Now, we just turned left, did we not? Say yes. Good answer. So we need to get out of this, but we need right hand flow. We just turned left. Boys cross run. Girls slide together. Girls trade. They're begging to use that left hand. So for successful dance habits, as callers, we need to recognize to use those hands. Now, I don't call a Dixie style to an ocean wave from boys fold behind the girls for any length of time. Once I've got it taught, then I will do this, swing through. Boys run, bend the line, do a right and a left through. And I tell them, normally when we do Dixie style, it will follow a flutter wheel, a right and left through as we just did in something. But boys, are you standing behind the girls? Say no. So boys, you're part of when you hear ladies lead Dixie style. Boys, do this for me. Slide behind the girls. Ladies lead Dixie style to an ocean wave. And boys, your left hand will work every time. Again, callers create good dance habits in dancers by using good choreography or thinking about their choreography and how they're going to present that so they can alternate hands. Boys cross run to the far right side. Ladies trade. Swing through, and here's how I might call that to new dancers. Now we're talking new dancers. Boys run, bend the line, do a right and a left through. Boys slide behind her. Ladies lead Dixie style to an ocean wave. Boys cross run to the right-hand side. Ladies trade in the middle. And I've alternated hands the whole time, and yet we've managed to get through a whole bunch of stuff, and we talk about the counter dancing that Chris mentioned. It's really, really important for good dance habits. Yes.
Just very briefly. I remember going to one of your teaching sessions several years ago, and one of the other things I remember you doing is coaching the boys when they hear that call coming up just to get their left shoulder ready. Because a lot of them start to turn away or they move in a different direction. But you told me to coach the boys to start to turn the left shoulder in. So that's the available hand.
And if they adjust, if they counter dance, that's indeed what happens. Swing through, boy run, bend the line, do a right and a left through. Boys slide behind her. Ladies lead Dixie style, and that left shoulder will work for you. It works every time. That's what creates good dance habits in dancers. Do this for me. Boys cross run. Girls trade. I'm sorry, I can't do anything. I got to call that way. Swing through. Boy run. It just doesn't work. Bend the line. Watch what happens. This time, boys, don't slide behind the girls. Do a right and a left through. Ladies lead Dixie style to an ocean wave. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. Well, yeah, you guys slid behind because you knew that was coming. But it's really important. Counter dancing, but the use of hands Hands are so important with every single thing that we do. And I just can't say that enough. Getting square with walls is so important. Left swing through. Girls run around the boy. Bend the line. We're square with the couple we're working with. Pass through. Bend the line. You're square with the couple you're working with. Little things like this. Slide through, if you would, please. Touch a quarter. As callers, we sometimes get an idea that we want to do like a split circulate. We want to do something. I lean to the side of being cautious before calling something. If I haven't called a split circulate during an evening, I might work a different routine. Because do we have an ocean wave across here? Do you see that? Okay. For good dance habits, that's the focus of these dancers at this point in time. So scoot back. Now the focus has changed to that box. Split circulate. Split circulate. Centers trade. Now we're back to an ocean wave. Swing through. Scoot back. Split circulate. Good dancing habits come from callers thinking about what they're going to call. You set people up to break them down. You set people up to win. And you can go either way. But we can talk about successful dance habits. But it starts with the caller being prepared and thinking about what you're going to call and how you're going to present it. Because, again, now we have a wave. Centers trade. Swing through. That's the focus of these dancers at this point in time. Swing through again. It's in a wave. Centers trade. Okay, but I want to do a split circulate. It's not going to work very well here unless you do this. Scoot back. Split circulate. Split circulate. Boy, run. They'll do it first time, every time, without breaking down. And I always question guys that just call touch quarter, split circulate. What's the hurry? You're going to have 12 minutes of patter or 8 minutes of patter, whatever it is. There's no need. You don't have to get there right away. Take your time. I mean, you might run out of material before the night's over. So take your time. Okay. Sure.
Something, two things that Jerry just calls superbly. And I don't know how many of you picked it up, but there's a whole thing on the value of centers trade. Did you notice how many centers trades he did? Cast off 3/4, next call centers trade. That's the difference. That's the key. He did boys cross run, girls trade. There's a strong sense. You never can have too many centers trade in your dance. We're talking about two-faced lines or waves, not regular lines. Pass the ocean. He was just working the split circulate idea. If we call pass the ocean and then girls trade, which is a good thing to call, and that's a whole other talk because it smooths out the action for the girls. Girls trade. So now the girls are looking, the whole square is looking east-west because of that trade. Now you come back and call split circulate. Immediately the square has to shift their focus north-south. A lot of people can't do that focus. So that's why, as a rule of thumb, never call split circulate after a center's trade because it's too much refocus. Do a single hinge, and now we're right into the scoot back or the split circulate. So as a hand it back to Jerry, but I'm big on what not to call, and one of the things you don't call is center's trade and then split circulate. Or scoot back, because it's immediately changing the focus of the square 90 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the subject is called successful dance habits, but it's going to start with you. You set successful dance habits by how you present what you want the dancers to do. And Flippo was left now, so I can use this. I used it in the other session. I have a lot of Flippoisms. But Flippo told me one time, he said, anytime you get two boys together, two girls together, or you get people have sashayed, you don't have to fix them. If you leave them more than 3 calls, they'll fix it. Don't have to worry about it. That's also part of successful dance habits. Now, we laugh about that. We chuckle about that, and I have fun teasing Flippo about it. But it's so true. Once you leave people other than normal, more than 3 or 4 calls, you won't have to fix it. You will absolutely, they'll fix it. They'll just be nice and happy and home, and there you are looking at you. All right, so let's do this. Centers trade. Okay, you've got 2 boys together, 2 girls together. Got to be a little careful with this, but this is where you can get yourself into trouble with successful dance habits. I want to run the centers here for a second, but you need to set people up so they can do this, because the boys always run. The girls rarely have an opportunity to run. So how would you create successful dance habits for that? For right now, centers trade again, if you would, please. Scoot back, boys go. Boys run around the girls. Do a right and left through. You do this when you first teach the call. Pass through. You'll go through the explanation. I'm not about to do that. But to create successful dance habits, what's good for the boys is good for the girls. But you want to set it up so that when you complete it, everybody's normal. All right. Do a partner trade, if you would, please. Do a right and left through and roll away. Okay. Pass through. So I want the girls to run to the right, but the whole idea of this little exercise is that to create successful dance habits, so the girls have an opportunity to learn to run and to do it correctly, we're facing out. When you face back in, everybody's more comfortable. And I want the girls to run to the right. Girls run right. Boys run right. Everybody's normal. And the girls have had a chance now to work a run. So you would do that a little bit. Do a right and a left through. Roll away. It isn't what you call, it's how you call it, is what I'm saying. Pass through. Girls run. Boys run. Instantly we're normal. That's what we're talking about. If you leave people out of normal very long. Touch a quarter. Single file circulate. Boys run. Touch a quarter. Check a wave. Centers trade. Right. Now, centers run around the ends. The girls have had a chance to see that. And if I'm going to do that in my dance later on and I'm with a group that I don't know, I will have worked that run sequence from half sachet just so I can make sure that the girls have an idea what's happened. Because now the girls run, couples circulate, and they're not uncomfortable. Couples circulate, if you would, please. Okay. The point is getting people normal as quickly as you can. And Ferris wheel. Girls square through 3. It's a great chance to check out, can they do that? Boys reach in, courtesy, turn the girl, and you're normal. But you create successful dance habits with the way you call, with the way you teach calls, and with how you approach what dancers are doing. That's my opinion, and that's how I believe we should call. I think we could create a whole lot less frustrated dancers if we all could exercise that type of control and that type of thought when we present our material. Ed?
It's called Setting the Dancers Up for Success. Any questions for...
and thanks to these guys.
Yeah, nice hand for the square there. Yeah, in the back. Oh,
Barbie, we've got a microphone coming.
Barbie Ashwell from Oregon. Jerry, can you please talk to us about hand positions? I believe in doing touch a quarter, swing through, that sort of thing, that in every class I've been in, I was taught that it was a hands up. As Lee and I travel across the United States, we have a bunch of problems because I'll have someone in my right hand with a hands up and in my left hand with palms down. And that's not bad when you're an experienced dancer, but if you're a fairly new dancer at your first convention and that happens, that's pretty, they really lose track of where they are. You wouldn't think they would, but they do.
I actually dance whenever possible. That's an issue for me as well. I teach hands up. I really do. That's what we decided to do. However,
come to New England.
Understand that when they decided that, the reason that was decided was because people were using forearm grips. Actually, that's the best way to do anything, was with a forearm. However, we had ladies with bruises all over them. Hands down, the ladies get their hands squeezed. So everybody was going to go hands up. However, parts of the country were going to leave CALLERLAB. So the only way you can resolve that is recognizing there are regional differences. Why? Because they won't adjust. That's the way we've always done it.
In New England, where the American Revolution began, we've decided to keep our hands down. And for us, that's comfortable. And just when I was with these folks a few minutes ago, I kept saying, hands up, hands up, hands up. You have to, when in Rome, do what the Romans do. And so for me, hands down is completely natural, completely comfortable. When I leave New England, it's hands up. Yes, a long time ago, there was a lot of discussion when CALLERLAB began, hands up, hands down. New England decided to stay on the other side. Yeah.
I was around because I'm old, too, and so I was around then.
What two? What's this two stuff?
First of all, CALLERLAB initially said palms up. Then because of this flap, CALLERLAB amended that to say regional differences are acceptable. Either way is now acceptable with CALLERLAB. It's not you're wrong, we'll let you do it, but you're wrong. No, CALLERLAB has said whatever you're doing is fine. The reason it started, I think CALLERLAB started with the palms up, is because people on the definitions that were, when CALLERLAB first started and that were involved with writing the definitions for mainstream, those callers were from west of the Mississippi. And so that's why it was palms up. East of the Mississippi, palms down. And it's not just New England. It's the whole mid-Atlantic states, the East Coast. I'm a big believer in forearms because that's natural. You don't walk down a street like this, like you're being held up. No, you like this. So there was a theory that I feel has held true for a long time, and this isn't meant to insult anyone, but the phrase for 50 years has been the higher the level, the lower the hands. So that's kind of the background of it, but it's really when in Rome, do in Rome. Yeah.
No, my question really was for Chris, and I'm Ron from Washington State. Where did the lower hands start, or how did we get there originally before we had this discussion about whether we're up or down?
Well, when I first came into square dancing in the Northeast area of the Mid-Atlantic region, not New England, everybody was arms down. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, it was all arms down. You never saw palms up at all. We never saw palms up until you talked to people west of the Mississippi. Now, I remember talking about regional differences. I don't know whether it's still done this way. It was in Colorado where right and left grand isn't done a hand pull by. It's hand pull by up here. I was told it was done that way 20 years ago. I don't know whether it still is, but that's a regional difference. So why these things start, I don't know.
I know the answer. It's because we don't eat grits and gravy up in New England. Everybody's got to be different.
Well, there's no grits in Pennsylvania and Ohio either.
I just saw it at the breakfast table this morning, and I was still thinking about that.
Okay, well, let's continue on.
We have one more quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
Please, go ahead. That's you.
I forgot what it was going to be. Mike Gormley, Mike Gormley from Florida. The regional styling. I'm willing to accept that, but the trouble is, like down in Florida, we get visitors from other areas, and nobody can decide what we're doing at this dance. It's half and half, and that's what's frustrating to me. And then also on another similar subject, CALLERLAB teaches in their manuals for all forward stars, it's palms up, not the pack saddle. But yet you see the guys doing the pack saddle on a forward star.
Well,
but yet
they're old.
But CALLERLAB teaches palms up.
It used to be that way. Well, way back when.
So, and when I teach my class, I teach palms up for boys on a forward star. Am I doing it wrong?
No.
Because I'm following CALLERLAB recommendations.
You follow
But they go to a dance and they're going to run into that pack saddle going forward.
Well, just tell your dancer. I always tell the dancers what they're going to run into, and then they say, just recognize you're better trained than those people.
That's kind of what I say. Just realize that, what's right, but do it the way you have to.
I think the most missed dance call right now is circle to a line because of this slide to a line thing. And it has to do with shoulders, and it has to do with regional differences. We're going to have to accept those whether we like them or not. I find it very difficult to dance with people with hands down because I'm a hands-up guy. However, when in Rome, you have to adjust, and I kind of watch the squares to see who's doing what, and then I'll try to adjust to them. But when we first went with this hands-up thing, I was punching everybody in the stomach, and now I'm clipping them on the jaw. So
this whole thing of slide to a line, and it's infiltrated the whole country. I don't have any problem with it. I don't call circle to a line. Lee Cotman in mainstream, the mainstream panel he was on yesterday, he says he never calls circle to a line because he doesn't like the way that people do it. I don't like the way that people do it, so I never call circle to a line. I call anything else. That's how you get around it. That's how you get around this. Okay, we're going to run out of time. I wanted to follow up on some things that Jerry and Chris mentioned. Our activity, and I travel throughout the country, and our activity, we don't have square dancing anymore. We have square walking. It's rare for me to see people dance to the music. And Jerry mentioned that we should dance and not walk, and that should be taught in every class. Dance to the music. Keep your feet going. And Chris mentioned about flow. As a dancer, I always want my feet to keep moving. So if a guest caller is in and to my club and I'm dancing along and maybe he's stalling to pick up some other people, I slow down, but my feet are still moving. He has to blatantly stop before I will wind up at a stop. He can go pretty slow, and I can still keep my feet moving. As callers, we need to encourage dancers to dance rather than to walk. And as Jerry said, how you do this in tennis shoes, I don't know. Jerry mentioned about walls and getting people lined up, couples facing and to walls. Walls is very important because the human race is straight line oriented. We build our highways straight where we can. We have our farm fields plowed straight where we can. Yes, on occasion there may be circles, but that's the general thing we're aiming for. So the human race, the mind is straight line oriented. So if the square gets off a little cattywampus on a 30-degree angle, all of a sudden the square may break down. They don't know why. I'm broken down, yet he didn't call anything. I don't know. Why is this? Because the square wasn't lined up with walls. We always tell our dancers, if you notice the square getting a little bit off from walls, you be the one to either overdo or underdo the call by 10%. That'll help get the square back. All it takes is one or two people in the square to do that. Now, generally, that's not a problem. But the biggest problem in facing walls is when the caller says, promenade, don't slow down. Somebody wheel around. Nobody's facing walls. They're strewn all over the floor. What I do, especially as a guest caller, I look for what couples on the floor are trying to adjust to get that square lined up with walls. And if I see any couple doing that, I say, that's the strongest, those are strong couples. I'm going to use them as my key couples all night. But that's what you want to do. On promenade, don't slow down. Heads wheel around. You're in there. Immediately just adjust your body a little bit. Now, you may not get the square aligned all right away, but on the next call, say the next call is right and left through, maybe you underdo the courtesy turn a little bit or overdo it a little bit. Everybody else will follow along with you. That's the key place where walls can kind of dynamite the square. I'm trying to, what else? Oh, Chris mentioned on don't turn around, which is vital. Why don't we turn around when we're broken down? Why, if you're lost, should you not turn around? Because it's very difficult to guide somebody if they're standing there in your face. But it's very easy to come up behind someone with the arm behind the back and guide them gently into place. That's why you don't turn down if you're lost. Instead, you stand there, you turn your head, look in all directions. If you see where you should go, go there. If you don't see where to go, don't move. Expect that someone will come up from behind and guide you into place. Jerry mentioned the importance of taking hands. To me, that's the number one most important thing. To make it number one with our dancers, we don't tell them just take hands. You ask any caller in this country, do you teach taking hands in your beginner's class? They'll say, sure. Then why is it when I'm traveling around I don't see people taking hands? It's because it isn't emphasized enough. It must be emphasized over and over again until it's a second nature as breathing. And as you've noticed from some of my comments here, I'm into kind of psychological things. So I want to kind of implant in their mind psychologically how to take hands. So I tell them, don't just take hands after every call. Hands must be taken 1/2 second after the completion of a call. They hear 1/2 second, they think, I guess it means he wants me to do this kind of fast. I don't care if it's only 1 second. I don't care if it goes to 1 second, but I want to plant that in the mind of 1/2 second.
May I intercede?
Oh, yes.
I make a game out of this. I make a game out of facing walls. I make a game out of almost everything because I could be working, so I kind of like this job. But I tell them, if you're not facing the wall square on, chances are boys are wrong. If you're not holding hands, boys are definitely wrong.
Which is kind of unusual since we know the boys are the better dancers, but it happens.
Well, I don't know.
It
I always
looks
expect
good
to be hung in effigy at some point in time, but
And mine
anything
is
goes
now.
wrong, it's the boys' fault. I just find that to be true. And to the hand thing, Ed is so correct. It is so important to touch hands. Instantly, it orients you to whether you have a line, whether you have a wave, whether you have a column. No matter what you have, hands tell you everything.
Phase 2 on taking hands. It's not enough to tell them to take hands 1/2 second after the completion of every call. Second thing you tell them, elbows must be bent. Because if you're standing there in a square and your arms are way outstretched, the square is much too large to operate efficiently. So we tell them, check your elbow. If you bend your elbow, that pulls everybody in close. Those are the 2 key things to tell people on taking hands. Here's another thing on styling that that dancers should be told. The dancers should be told. We know when somebody breaks down, they're told to get to facing lines and the caller will pick them up. Fine, everybody knows this now. Most everybody. So I'm calling along. Maybe there's 5, 6 squares on the floor. 1 square breaks down. Fine. They get back. They get to facing lines. And I know it's my job to get the whole floor to facing lines to pick them up. But unfortunately, it's going to take me 2 or 3 calls to get the floor to facing lines. And if this square that's now formed facing lines, waiting for me to get the floor to facing lines, if they are so thick and aren't thinking, they'll jump in on one of the calls I'm using to get the floor to facing line. They're down the drain right there. And if they're that dumb, then I'm done with them. I'm not going to pick them up. And the boys are wrong. Yeah, so, in telling people to form lines, if they're broken down, two things. We tell them first square back up. Some squares will try to wiggle all around and get into facing lines right there. Nah, it's too much effort. Got to have a plan, formal, step by step. Square back up, then the heads back out to the right. Why the heads? It could be the sides. We need a rule. So it's the heads back out to the right. But if you have dumb heads, they only have 3 seconds. And if they haven't moved by 3 seconds and the sides see that, then the sides go out to the right. Because somebody's got to make a line. Boys' fault. Boys' fault. Yeah. Okay. So that's the key. 2 key things to tell dancers when they break down that they haven't thought about. A lot of callers don't tell them when they get to face it. First of all, square back up first, then the heads back out to the right. But if they don't, sides do it. And second, stand there and wait and look at the rest of the floor and don't move until you see the floors in facing lines. Because if you pick up a star through when the caller is trying to get to facing lines, you're dead in the water. Next thing I want to mention, I am big on styling. And styling is primarily the job of the ladies. I'm all for elegance with the ladies dancing. That's why I don't like ladies dancing in slacks. I like ladies in skirts so we can have the styling. I'm going to show you something on styling right here that I even give me that mic. This is something I like to do on a right and left grand. It just looks kind of neat. And the reason it kind of looks kind of neat is because not too many people do it, although I've noticed some more people do it. This is my wife, Marilyn. We're finishing a right and left grand. So we each have our corners by our left hand. We're going to pull by, and then we're going to meet to do the promenade. So we're going to pull by with the left hand, come up, and she will turn like this, and just as I get to her, she's right here, and it's a promenade. Let's show it again. We do the left pull by, and she immediately turns out, lets herself drift forward, and just as she's completed her turn, I'm beside her. It looks elegant. Thank you. It looks elegant, and not too many people do it. Also, as a woman, if you don't like the twirl under that a lot of men do to you, that solves the problem because they can't even reach you to twirl under. Second, I love skirt work for the girls, especially, I guess it's a little more difficult to do with the prairie skirts. But if you have any kind of just regular skirt or square dance dress, I love skirt work on the ends of the line, forward, up to the middle, and back. If the girl's on the end of the line, she does the skirt work. On the promenade, to hold the skirt up. I'm big on skirt work and having the girls look elegant. And this is something you're not dependent on the guys to do. See, you can do it yourself. You can be in charge of the skirt work. Yeah, and it makes the guys look good. There's a whole handout. One of my 3 handouts here is how to look good when you're dancing. And there's a section there on skirt work. And that was written by a lady caller because I didn't know about skirt work. So I said, write this thing for me. So she wrote it, and it's in there. So it's I'm big on skirt work for the girls. I was looking at my notes here. Any comments on anything we just mentioned here?
Okay. All right. Before we quit, one thing that I wish I could impart to every caller here: when you're calling, have fun with your calling. Make everything fun. Do you realize how lucky we are that we can call square dances? It's just make it fun. These successful dance habits are really dependent upon you. You can make it fun for them. And if you prepare and you think about these few little things that we talked about today, or talk to somebody whom you enjoy dancing to and kind of look at what he's doing or she's doing, and you will find that they are taking some of these things that we all 3 talked about here today. But have fun with your calling. Have fun with your dancers.
One last thing I just thought of the girls on the skirt work. I love skirt work on Weave the Ring. That's where it can be really elegant. And unfortunately, some women, I don't know where they got the idea of flipping the skirt back and forth real fast like they're dancing on top of the bar in Mexico. And I don't know where this came from, but Mexico, yeah. But it doesn't look, I like the skirt work, one raise of the skirt for one hand, the other side of the skirt for the next. It looks elegant, slow and elegant on the skirt work, and that'll make you look even more elegant as you're in the square. For those that came in after we got started, we have free handouts up here, and feel free to reproduce these, pass them out anywhere you wish. On behalf of Chris Pinkham and Jerry Junck, I'm Ed Foote, the moderator, and we want to thank you for being here for the Successful Dance Habits panel.
Just one more thing. If you didn't get my handout, Wade has it on the computer down there if we ran out, so he should be able to handle that for you. Don't forget your sense of humor when you go to call.